My name is Dale Ecuyer, and welcome to my channel. I love helping parents create healthier, happier, more financially secure homes by providing information, resources, and a very unique opportunity in the network marketing industry. So go on and click that subscribe button so you don't miss out.
Here we're going, Adrienne. All right. We're talking about anxiety in children. Do you have kids that are really struggling with this, or is it maybe something that you're not even identifying? Because there's certain behaviors that you think could be defiant behaviors or identified as something else, and it could be underlying anxiety. So I have Adrienne Bishop with me. She is a certified positive discipline parent educator and a life coach. She has an incredible practice helping families really create health and harmony, right? Just harmony in the home, kids and parents understanding one another and getting along. So let's talk about anxiety, Adrienne. Like what are some of the things that we can do to help our kids? But first and foremost, how do we identify that it's really anxiety that's going on? Because I think we miss that sometimes.
Yeah. So a lot of the families that I work with come to me because they have a behavior that is challenging for them. They can't figure out how to stop it, to get rid of it. And a lot of the families also that I work with have highly sensitive kids. I don't know if you're aware of those characteristics, but it's kids that tend to be very emotionally intense. They have very strong feelings. They also have physical sensitivities, very strong like senses of shame, right? So guilt and shame tend to be big. So if you kind of punish your kid or tell them they're doing something wrong and they like immediately like break down crying or have some sort of really strong reaction to it, a lot of times that can be shame coming up. And that's what highly sensitive kids feel very frequently. So what happens when very typical kids that are highly sensitive, or even other kids, they have behaviors that are appearing like defiance, saying they don't want to go somewhere, like, no, I don't want to go there. That's stupid. Like those kinds of things. Or if they're doing schoolwork and they're saying like, I can't do this. This is stupid. All of these like really negative, a lot of negativity can come up, like, especially for some kids between the ages of like 6 and probably teenage, they can kind of come out with this negativity all the time, like pessimism, like constantly not wanting to do things, constantly thinking things are stupid, or not wanting to do things with the family when you ask them to do stuff and they just want to stay back. And a lot of times we can just think they're just being difficult. They're being negative. They're being defiant. And what I've found, especially in my practice with the parents I work with, is that it ends up underneath that they're anxious. They're anxious about the next steps. They don't know what the plan is, right? So like if you're going to a new place and they just automatically say they don't want to go, they could criticize the place, start to get negative. A lot of times it's because they're anxious. They don't know what's going to happen and they start to get nervous. And one of the coping mechanisms, or the only way they know how to handle it, is to just come out and say they don't want to go or it's stupid. They don't have any sort of vocabulary to say to you, well, I'm kind of anxious because I've never been there and I don't really know what's going to happen. You know what I'm trying to say? So like, as kids, like they don't have that fully developed prefrontal cortex. They don't have the logical brain that we do as adults. So, and they don't have the experience to understand what they're feeling. So they don't know how to express themselves and tell you what's going on. And so you see these kind of symptomatic behaviors that look like defiance, negativity, pessimism, many, many behaviors. It can be like outbursts too, just like really lots of screaming or crying. And it can actually be anxiety underneath. And when we figure that out and when we treat it that way as the parents, it will resolve. You actually can effectively solve the problem. But if you're treating it as the other things, defiance, negativity, you're going to think that, okay, well, I need to take something away or punish. Or if you think they're being negative, you think there's something wrong, right? They're so negative all the time. There's something wrong with my child. And so you end up dealing with it in the way of like dismissing them, arguing with them, challenging them, punishing them. And all of those things are exactly the opposite of what anxiety needs to quell and calm. So that becomes one of the biggest things that I always am noticing that parents like just don't even know to look for when it comes to these behaviors. And it's not always anxiety, of course. Sometimes it's control, sometimes it's attention, but a lot of times it ends underneath, it turns into anxiety or wanting to be right all the time, right? Wanting to have control and have your way can also be anxiety. So it shows up in such interesting, different ways for every kid. My daughter, she gets very angry when she's anxious. I mean, it's like screaming outbursts, yelling. And it took me a while to figure out that was what was going on. And initially we were just like, she's so angry, like this is a problem. And then once we figured out it was an anxiety issue, we were able to address it as anxiety, as a feeling that she was fighting, right? It's a lot of resistance of the feeling. And then it started to actually, her screaming and her yelling and her anger went down. Like it just completely, like it lessened. And then when it happens, we just tell her like, hey, are you feeling anxious about something? And then she can snap into explaining, because she's 10, what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just one of those things where if we know that's underneath, we can treat it differently.
I love that. I'm resistance to a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
What really like grabbed me when you said that.
Right.
So just go elaborate a little bit more on that. And then also how you work through that with your daughter. Was it more?
Yes.
Yeah. So go ahead. So talk about.
So this is really actually a really good point, Dale, because I've been working with her for probably like 3 years on helping her just to feel and knowing what's going on in her body emotionally. So we have been doing a lot of validation. You're feeling anxious. It's totally okay. It makes sense. You don't know what's going to happen. At this party, you're probably really nervous about meeting new people. It makes total sense. How can we support you? What are you thinking? Like, what's going on? What are you worried about? And so I just validate. I never challenge her. I help to just kind of let her know feelings are just part of who we are as humans. Nothing's gone wrong. That's a big one. Nothing's gone wrong and you're not alone. So I've been doing that with her for a while. And that's super important to have that foundation when it comes to your kids, if they're dealing with especially like strong emotions like anxiety. And the resistance of it is when she is, I don't want to feel this way. She gets to that point. I don't want to feel this way. I don't want to worry so much. Or the anger is the resistance of the anxiety. It's the reaction. It's like an avoidance tactic. Yeah. So you can kind of understand, like, people don't want to feel bad. So let's get rid of it. And that's what kids do. Also, so what I do is I work with her in that way. And we've always talked about emotions and feelings. And then there's actually a tool that I've been using recently because she's 10 and because she has this background. I coach her essentially like I coach my parents. I coach her through the idea that like your thoughts are what's creating your anxiety. So how can we work through that? And so I give her this little trick, and it's this trick called like, what's your superhero character's name? And what do they do in this moment? So her superhero is Ella the Brave. And Ella the Brave, like, what would Ella the Brave do when you have a softball game and you're really nervous? Like, what would she do? And a lot of times they don't know, but they think, and the wheels start turning, and I'll help her go through it. Like, maybe Ella the Brave would just play the position the best she could and have a good time. Do you think that's what she would do? And she's like, yeah, okay. And then it helps them give that little bit of courage up so that they can give it a try. And it doesn't work all the time, but most of the time it gets her thinking, like her wheels are turning and it's going in. So she's understanding, maybe I do have control over something. Maybe I do have control over how I tell the story to myself about what's happening. And so that once you have control, that's exactly what anxiety wants. It wants control. So you're giving them that. So that's why it's so empowering to have like that tool. Or you can even just ask, like, how can you tell this story so that it feels better?
Wow.
That kind of idea.
That is so good. That is great.
Yeah.
So did you come up with Ella the Brave, or is that some character that I don't know about because I'm old?
Oh, no, we just came up with it. So we just used her name and then any sort of like characteristic. I have clients that ended up with like Nick the Dragon Slayer because that just sounded fun to them. So it doesn't even have to be like a characteristic, a trait, like a strength or something. It can just be something fun. So what would Nick the Dragon Slayer do? It still sounds powerful. And then they don't have to be attached to the thoughts that they're having and the feelings. They can detach them from who they are as people. They can make it, they can separate the two, which is really powerful too. So yeah, it's a really neat, just a neat tool to kind of help them through. Wow. But that is, again, once you're validated, once they're understanding kind of what's happening. Because if you immediately start to challenge what they're going through, they might resist that. So just kind of as like a little warning. And if they do, it's okay. You just use it another time. So
yeah, and no, but I love what you're saying about like acknowledging it, obviously, and normalizing and saying it's normal to feel anxious.
Yeah, totally.
So let's think about what you're saying and what is the story that you're telling yourself about why it's uncomfortable, and just even talking about it, because sometimes when you hear yourself talk about it, you're like, yeah, that's really stupid. That's an unreasonable fear. Like,
Right. It's not big deal. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Or if they're like, well, I don't know if anyone's going to like me, or, something along those lines. Like, is that rational? Like, no, it's not, but it's letting them kind of speak it and kind of go, like you said, the wheels are turning. That's so good. That's really, really great.
Yeah. It gives them a little bit of power over what's going on with them. So important. Yeah.
And like you said, the control piece. If you can give them control, like give them choices, which will also give them control. But then let them know that's a secure feeling. Like, yeah, I have control over the thoughts that I'm telling myself, the story that I'm telling myself.
Yeah.
The way I'm going to look at this. And that's an incredible life lesson. I mean, that's what we all as adults even.
I was going to say, adults don't even know that tool a lot. And so it's something you can use as an adult is to change your story. Like, how do I want to tell this story? Yes. Yeah, totally works. I actually have my own superhero version of myself that I use sometimes when I'm like a little bit nervous or afraid, and I use my own superhero. It's just like it's just kind of a way to get yourself into the feeling of empowerment. Yeah. So yeah.
Oh, good. Really, really good.
How it's important to be able to regulate yourself in order to help your child regulate when they're anxious, right? So that's a big part of how I coach parents, is to help them to learn how to handle their own emotional challenges and struggles. Because we don't know, nobody actually was taught this, so it's important to know for yourself. And then you can coach your kids. It really does work. It's pretty cool.
You got to parent yourself too. You got to stay calm. Like you say, calm, confident parenting. I mean, that's calm and confident is like such important.
Yep.
And patience, all that.
Magical emotions that work.
All right. Well, thanks so much for being with me. Continue to learn, continue to grow. Like, you can create a much more harmonious child relationship, but you need the skills, you need the awareness, you need to parent yourself, stay calm, be patient, all that good stuff.
Totally possible.
Thanks so much, Adrienne, for being with me.
Thank you.